Hello team, it's time to continue the old song and dance with Battleblock Theater. Developed and published by the Behemoth, Battleblock Theater is a puzzle platformer that puts you in a dire situation as a person held captive by sentient cats in a strange theater. Your friend Hattie Haddington gets brainwashed by a strange hat, and your only option in this dark turn of events is to platform your way through these cats' sick form of entertainment and hope Hattie is still fine. Now, I use the term puzzle platformer because Battleblock Theater is less about reflexes and combat and more about figuring out how to navigate these various obstacle courses to grab a certain amount of gems and reach the exit. Each mission requires you to get 3 gems to advance, but there could be up to 7 gems in each level alongside a ball of yarn that is especially hard to acquire. Players have access to 2 tools among a total of 10 that can do an array of things such as provide platforms and displace enemies as needed. With only 2 tools and their wits, players are expected to navigate an array of levels to get to the end. While Battleblock Theater doesn't do anything new or innovative, it does an excellent job at level design. Each level is designed with a specific line of logic in mind, and the game uses all its set pieces with great ingenuity. Obstacle courses are rarely reused, and every level has a certain part that made me think, oh wow, that was really cool. Levels also feel really balanced. The obstacles are oftentimes intimidating and can kill you easily, but nothing ever feels unfair. Your tools often have niche uses that make them very useful, but none are totally overpowered. The player character has access to a double jump and some melee attacks as well, so the player doesn't wind up completely defenseless. Level design overall is probably the strongest thing about Battleblock Theater, and it really shines as you play the game. Another good thing about Battleblock Theater is the co-op. The game was certainly designed with co-op in mind, with it being the big thing shown in trailers and in the game's menu as well. While you go through the same amount of levels in single player, the co-op levels are all retooled with co-op in mind, and it all feels really exciting. Areas that once required an environmental setup now need your co-op buddy to advance, which makes the game feel like a co-op experience. Behemoth, however, makes the co-op really old school by both forcing friendly fire and having a monetary reward that only rewards one player. This gives co-op a slight feeling of Battletoads, which allows players to mess with each other to no end, which is something that is always positive in co-op games. Despite the game's excellent balancing, the actual gameplay of Battleblock Theater feels like a clumsy mess. The core mechanic of jumping just feels odd. The jump descent in this game feels abrupt, which makes getting precise double jumps somewhat difficult. This becomes a problem later on since the player is required to do precise double jumps in difficult scenarios, and the clumsy controls make failing these tough jumps more frustrating than challenging. The game also doesn't explain its mechanics well. One specific thing you are never told is that you can use both jumps in midair if you walk off a ledge or drop from a pole. And the game has puzzles fairly early on that require this knowledge, yet you have no idea that this luxury exists. Finally, there are combat segments in the game, and they outright suck. Behemoth was never great with combat mechanics, as seen with Castle Crashers, and they really haven't improved in Battleblock Theater. Combat segments just feel dumped in as an afterthought in random levels, and the enemy AI is strikingly good at interrupting all your attacks the moment you input them. The combat is by no means hard since there's oftentimes hazards nearby to kill enemies, but it just feels shoehorned in with no real thought for integrating it into the game model. Finally, the game overall just feels like a slog. The game length in both individual stages and the game itself feels like it overstays its welcome, and the game's difficulty curve never goes past the initial learning process for each level set. It really is a shame that a game with such well-done level designs and game elements feels like such a drag to play in the end. Battleblock Theater is presented in a hand-drawn 2D aesthetic. If you ever played Castle Crashers, Alien Hominid, or even been to Newgrounds once in your life, it's pretty much par of the course. Admittedly, I like this art direction and I never got tired of looking at the game, but it feels like Behemoth is trying to stay within a safe zone they have established. Animations are all well done and feel cartoony in nature, and the designs overall for characters and environments feel like they mesh well together. The music in this game is pretty good. Each track in this game feels appropriate for the high-class theater theme that the game established from the beginning, and the music is pretty good for the circumstances at hand. I really like the music for the finale of each world since it's a high-energy shift in tone that accentuates the time attack death course at the end of each world. The writing for this game, though, is probably the most bloated pile of nonsense I have ever heard in my life. I mentioned earlier that the game has a tendency of overstaying its welcome, and the story segments of this game hammer this fact home. In between each level is a narrative segment giving context to why you as the player are going through these dire circumstances, and it all feels like it was written by a 5-year-old. It seems like Behemoth was trying so hard to give a good story alongside the gameplay, but they also tried to appeal to an audience with attention issues. Story segments are 10% story and 90% needlessly long explanations sprinkled with fart jokes and direct insults at the player. The story itself goes on way longer than it really should, and the constant barrage of comedy attempts really destroys any interest I had with the game. During the actual gameplay, the narrator will comment on your progress with quips that also feel like they just go on and on for no particular reason at times. At the very least, the narrator did a good job with the material he was given, and did his best to make the story actually work. Typically, you don't play a puzzle platformer for the story segment, and normally it doesn't interfere with my opinion of the game. But dear God, the writing in this game just feels like a stifling cloud of irritation that never goes away. The game engine for Battleblock Theater runs well, but feels kind of odd. The game takes up 2 GB of hard drive space, but when you look at the files, 90% of them is used exclusively by cutscenes, which is kind of frustrating. The game itself is really well optimized. A toaster could run this game without a problem, and at worst it uses less processor and memory resources than my web browser. The options menu is pretty nice, offering a good amount of options to tool around with alongside a decent tutorial to get you acclimated to the game. Controller support is basically the same affair as most console ports. Full keyboard, mouse, and 360 support is available, but you have to work to get PS3 controllers working. My only issue with the game is that it tries to keep you in the game at knife point. Loading the game involves 30 seconds of info that you absolutely cannot skip, and the menu navigations oftentimes default to resume game for everything, including the exit option. The placement for yes, no are swapped around as well, which makes it feel like the game is trying to trick you into staying in the game. It's a very well done game engine, but there are some contrivances that I am not a fan of. Battleblock Theater is so weird. It does a lot of things that irritated me to no end, yet it did something right in order to keep me going long enough to get every single gem in Yarn Ball. I bought the game on Steam sale, and even then I have a hard time deciding on the game's worth and enjoyment factor. I honestly cannot make a straightforward recommendation for this game, so I will instead say that the game is polarizing. If you liked Behemoth and their former work, then you will enjoy Battleblock Theater because it's more or less the same thing. If you are not a fan of the company or have neutral opinions about them, Battleblock Theater will probably not be the kind of game you're looking for.